So at its core, evidence synthesis is about systematically gathering, analyzing, and integrating research evidence to inform sound decisions. Whether in the health sciences, in education, or in social policy, or the humanities, it is a process that values rigor, it values transparency and balance, ensuring that the knowledge we draw on reflects the full range of perspectives and contexts in which it was produced. But as we know, evidence is never neutral. The way we collect it, the way we interpret it and present it can either reinforce or challenge inequities. This is why today's colloquium is so timely. Questions of whose voices are included, whose evidence is valued, and how ethical principles shape our synthesis are central to the integrity of research today. When we consider equity and inclusion in evidence synthesis, we are really talking about broadening the knowledge base, actively seeking out studies from diverse contexts, recognizing contributions from the global south, from marginalized communities, and from non-traditional sources of evidence. It's also about questioning hierarchies of knowledge that have historically privileged certain methodologies or languages over others. And then there's the ethical dimension, ensuring that the ways we collect, the way we interpret and disseminate evidence respect human dignity. It respects privacy and intellectual ownership. In an age of open science and digital sharing, ethical reflection becomes not a constraint, but a compass guiding responsible scholarship. The library, as many of you know, plays a pivotal role in this whole landscape. Librarians and information professionals are deeply involved in supporting systematic and scoping reviews, advising on search strategies, data management, and reproducibility. But more than that, we are advocates for equitable access to knowledge, for ensuring that information systems and research infrastructures are inclusive and fair. So increasingly, we find that evidence synthesis is no longer confined to the health sciences or to education. It has become a truly interdisciplinary methodology. Whether in environmental studies or business or social sciences or digital humanities, researchers are using synthesis methods to map trends, identify gaps, and inform policy. And this interdisciplinarity brings both opportunities and responsibilities to collaborate across domains, to integrate diverse forms of evidence, and to remain sensitive to the ethical challenges each field presents. And of course, we cannot discuss the future of evidence synthesis without acknowledging the growing presence of artificial intelligence. AI tools are reshaping how we identify, how we screen, and how we analyze research evidence. It helps us process vast amounts of literature that we would otherwise find to be unmanageable. From automated text mining to machine-assisted data extraction, these tools can dramatically increase efficiency and transparency. Yet, as with all technology, AI brings its own ethical questions. Algorithms can reproduce the very biases we aim to dismantle. Datasets can exclude marginalized voices, and decisions about inclusion and exclusion criteria can be made by systems that lack human judgment or contextual understanding. So as AI becomes more deeply embedded in evidence synthesis, our task is not only to use these tools, but to interrogate them, to ensure that technology serves equity rather than undermine it. So today's discussions invite us to think critically about how we as scholars, librarians, educators, expert practitioners can work together to embed critical reflection, inclusivity, and fairness in our evidence synthesis processes. So in that sense, this colloquium is not just about methods, it's about values. How we construct knowledge responsibly, how we ensure that research benefits all communities, and how we use evidence to make the world more informed, more equitable, and more humane. So thank you very much again to our speakers, our facilitators, and participants for contributing your insights to this important dialogue. I look forward to the conversations ahead, and I trust that today's colloquium will inspire new ways of thinking about evidence synthesis. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you so much, Shahama, for your valuable words this morning, and you're welcome. We definitely are looking forward to a really insightful and informative event today with the presentations and the speakers that we have lined up. My name is welcome to everybody today. My name is Leanne Brown, and I am the faculty librarian for natural sciences here at UWC Library, and I am part of the evidence synthesis committee. I would like to, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker today, who is Dr. Lara Skelly from the UK. And she, just to tell you a bit about her, she's the Open Research Manager for Data and Methods at Louw University in the UK. She was previously a research manager at Stellenbosch Business School and a librarian at the University of the Western Cape and the University of Cape Town. So she's coming from the Western Cape as well. Her research interests cover open research, research impact, and scientometrics, exploring the intersections of these broad themes. So welcome, Lara, and I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks, Shihalma, and thank you, Gerald, for putting this all together. It's really lovely to be back with UWC people, and I see so many familiar names in the audience, so it's really great to be here. Just a quick personal note, I have a sick 7-year-old child at home, and while I wait for childcare to come, he might need my attention. So please forgive me if I take a quick break if he needs me, just to attend to his care. I promise I'll be back and we'll make it as short and as little interruption as I possibly can. Right, and with that, let me get my presentation up. Wrong one. That would happen. There we go. Right, so you're welcome to download my presentation from the QR attached. And I wonder if, Gerald, if you're able to pop.
Lara, you are muted,
Laura.
Lara. You are muted.
Am I not muted now?
Yeah, no, we can hear you now. Thanks.
How much did you miss? Sorry.
No, I don't think we missed anything, or
Okay.
You can just start from your presentation.
Lovely. Thank you, Leanne. Yeah, Zoom does weird things. Right, so I was just saying that you're welcome to download the presentation by the QR code attached, and I'll put the DOI in the link in the chat after my presentation if that's easier for anyone. I'll also update this presentation in response to any questions that I might get, and so if I add more examples during this talk, I'll try and remember what they are and add links as I go after this event. So I was just saying that, you know, I'm sitting in the UK. Loughborough is a very small town, and well, medium-sized town in pretty much the middle of the country. And so I am as far as I could get from the ocean as possible in the UK, which makes me miss the Cape Town coast very, very much. But it's a lovely little place. It's full of trees, and so they're all turning red in the autumn now, and everything smells a little bit like dust. So it's lovely to be here in the UK as well. Okay. I'm just going to start with a quick story, and that is, I didn't actually realize that how the Oxford English Dictionary was made until I read a book some years ago. And it started in the 1850s, and what it was a small group of white men who invited submissions from anyone and everyone on examples of words that were in the written language. And so people could find these, cut them out of magazines or newspapers, and hopefully not books, and then post them into the Oxford Dictionary Committee. And then they would work towards a definition, and then they published the Oxford English Dictionary. But as you can imagine, in the 1850s, the only people who were really writing were other white men, English-speaking men for that matter. And so there was a lot of words that were simply not written down and then not included in a dictionary, which is a great shame, I think. And luckily they've updated their methods since then. But it highlights for how long this has been a problem, where we only look at certain people's evidence. And to just to give you a bit of background, I think most people in the audience would know what a systematic review is. There we go. But I don't know who's going to be watching the recording. So just to give a little bit of overview of what a systematic review is, and that's what I'm going to be focusing my talk on today. I first came across it when I was doing my PhD, and I had an enormous amount of literature. So I was looking at a very broad topic, and a lot of people had answered small sections of the topic. And so I was drowning in literature. And for a librarian to drown in literature, you can just imagine how many there were. And so the systematic review approach, which treats the published literature as evidence, was a perfect way for me to solve my problem. And what it does, it says, well, there's a lot of replication studies that happen in our sciences, where they answer studies that answer the same question, but perhaps from a different angle, different context, different method, different body of evidence. And a systematic review takes all of those replication studies and tries to find the common themes among them. If this is done in a quantitative method, it's usually called a meta-analysis. A systematic review can either then refer to both quant and qual, or just a qualitative analysis. So I'll refer to systematic reviews in the most general sense, so both quant and qual, throughout this presentation. Just makes life easier. Now, I just dug through the UWC catalog, and I found some great resources on how to do a systematic review. I can personally attest for the very last one. That's the one that guided me through my PhD literature review. And if you need more help, please talk to your librarian. So if you're watching this and you're not from UWC, and you have a librarian, go talk to that librarian. All right, so whose evidence? I'm going to start with probably the biggest divide that we can find within science, and that is the geographic divide, so the north-south. So let me go off to this presentation, this website. On the slide long enough for you to grab the link so you can play with it, but of course you can find it from the presentation. This has been floating around for quite a while. You can see 1997 is like almost 30 years ago. And what it is, it's a map of the world, but the size of the country has either been inflated or deflated according to the number of publications that country has produced. And if I scroll through the years, you can see how both the colors and the size change. So if you keep an eye on the USA, when I change that, do you see it becomes smaller? Yes, but darker red. It's publishing more. And here, China has suddenly grown. And if I scroll one more decade on, China is dominating completely. But where's Africa? Africa has stayed this skinny little country, or skinny little continent. So even if I go back to 1997, it's tiny. And that just shows the absolute north-south, global north, global south divide that we have within our publications. Now, I think this is a very, very powerful tool, but I do have some questions around how they put it together. So they say number of documents with authors from each country. Now, I'm sitting in the UK, and if I were to publish something with a UK affiliation, which is what I would put down if I did publish, would my would my work count for the UK? Or would it have to count for South Africa, which is the country of my birth? Or because I hold a citizenship in Ireland as well, just by accident of my grandfather being born there. I've never been to Ireland. Does Ireland have any claim to my research? And here it's via author, but often I see in these systematic reviews that they do it according to where the journal is being published. And we have heaps of South African journals that are published by European or American publishers. So how do we actually figure out which country has claim to our research? And that's a question I whenever I review a systematic review, that's what I ask, is how did you figure this out? How did you work it out? And this north-south divide is so entrenched. I'll give you another example. I am the managing editor for a South African journal, the South African Journal of Business Management. It's published in South Africa by AOSIS. And, I get emails from the journal all the time, from authors, from reviewers, from the publishers themselves. And every now and again, the Loughborough University spam filters kick up and just move all of the SAJBM emails to spam. And I have to fight and fight again. And they just say, well, it's based on where that IP address or where the website is located, where the servers are. And, if the algorithm has seen lots of spammy things coming from that country, they just automatically put all of that stuff in spam. And so it's horrific to me that would happen, that that silencing of the global south happens and we don't even know it. Another example of how the silencing happens, I see, because I've got a little bit of access to how the SAJBM is being accessed by readers, but I also have access to how the Loughborough University repository is being accessed. I've got a very clear comparison between these two, and I'm sorry that I couldn't show any figures because they're not as clear-cut as you might think, but the trend there is that the Loughborough University repository, since the rise of the long language models, is getting exponential more hits, but I'm not seeing the same trends with the SAJBM. And so we've got these systemic inequalities being entrenched into the AIs. The AI will go for what's most popular, and what's most popular remains the North. And the more we keep doing that, the more popular the North stays. Okay, let me move back to my presentation there. If I can figure out how. Right, I'll just pause you for a moment so that if you want to grab the link for this for that map, or take a copy of the QR code, that you can do that. All right. So geography is one thing, but gender is another one. So here is something that I found, which was just looking at gender outputs. And so it is, a little bit old, so it's pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. But it shows how the scholarly literature in these disciplines particularly are absolutely dominated by the male perspective. Absolutely dominated. It's not true of all disciplines. So library science is about 50-50 in terms of the, who's publishing where. And I think medicine, I saw somewhere recently, but I couldn't find the reference for it. It was about 60% in favor of women. So it is a disciplinary, there are disciplinary differences, but these differences, they do matter, because the perspectives of these things matter. Let's see, what is next? Language. Oh, I like to say that, the majority of researchers are not English first language, and nobody is first language is research. And how many times have you come across a statement that says, oh, this manuscript...
Lara, you muted?
Thanks a lot, Leanne. It seemed... Okay, sorry. Let me find out where I was again. Right. Thanks a lot, Leanne. It seems that when I move the Zoom toolbar, it mutes me. So we're talking about language, and how nobody's first language is research, and very few people have their first language to be in English. And even myself, as English first language, who's been working in research for pretty much my whole career, I've gotten this statement from reviewers to say that my language needs to be looked at. And it's wonderful that AI tools can help with this. That is one of the great benefits that I've seen, particularly as I'm slightly dyslexic. And so, you know, using these language tools really do help with the readability of the work. But, you know, there's still something that there's so many terms that just simply cannot be captured in English. You know, I don't know how many times I've tried to explain the concept of Ubuntu to somebody who's not South African, and our language just doesn't seem to do it justice. That's the poor thing about it. We have biases within the results as well. Let me move my toolbar. Hold on. Okay, not muted. So that you are more likely to be published if you are publishing positive results. So what's a positive result? A positive result is that you found a correlation between two variables. A negative result is where this correlation was not found. Not to say there isn't a correlation, it's just that you didn't find any evidence of it. And so this study, the link is in my notes, says if keeping other things equal, so just looking at the results, if you have a positive result, you are more likely to be published than if you have a negative result. Which is a great shame, because the publication of negative results is really, really useful. And this was absolutely highlighted during the COVID pandemic period, where if we had published all the things that didn't work, we would have a database of that. And when a new disease comes up like COVID did, we could say, well, we've tried all of those, let's try something else. And so negative results help researchers it saves research time, because it means that you don't have to go through the same mistakes or the same kind of dead-end road that other researchers have gone on. And I'm really pleased to say that this is starting to change, where you are seeing more and more publications, particularly in psychology, surprisingly, with publication of negative results. I remember maybe about 10 years ago, I wrote an article where it doesn't matter about the details of the article, but basically I said I tried a whole lot of methods and none of them worked to do something. And I couldn't get it published. And it's a great pity to me that remains in you know, my virtual desk drawer, and it's never seen the light of day. And I often think maybe I should dig it out, and usually then I forget about it 10 minutes later. So that's results, also bias. And you've got an output bias as well. You know, within our scientific literature, peer-reviewed journals remain king. And there are so many other kinds of outputs out there. So there's conferences, chapters, and books, you know, but there's also videos, exhibitions, and performances. On my own campus, there's a constant tug between what they call these diverse outputs and things that are easily packaged like a journal article. And what counts as evidence. So we're in the run-up to the Research Excellence Framework exercise in 2029, where basically the government looks at all the research that the UK has put out and judges it. And our funding for the next 7 years is based on where we rank within these judgments. And for a university like Loughborough, which is a very, very strong design and creative arts school, excluding things like videos, exhibitions, and performances is really, really damaging to our reputation in this REF exercise. And so there's a great big push for a recognition of these different file types, these output types, as being legitimate, because they are. You know, this is a communication of science. And it shows also, you know, what people think as valid evidence, you know, the lived experience of something versus, you know, the experiment that you might be doing in the lab, you know, which one is more valid? And there's a great big bias towards the latter. with ignoring of the former. But this again does us a disservice. An example here I can think of is in long COVID, where people were experiencing long COVID, but it had never been researched. And so if you are only going to research things that have already been researched, how do you come up with new ideas? How do you introduce new concepts, new theories to the literature? And there are so many more biases that I could really cover. I actually found a catalogue of biases, and I've got the link in my notes as well. Okay. So just then thinking about fairness then. Okay, so we've got all these things that are out there that are, that are biasing our literature. You can't get away from it. There's no way. What you can do is you can acknowledge that bias. You can say, actually, I'm only looking at peer-reviewed journal articles because of X, Y, and Z. You could, on that note, I've got an example where I was involved as a methodologist in a systematic review, and we couldn't find anything in the peer-reviewed journal articles. And when we broadened our search to include predatory journals, surprisingly, we found a whole lot of research. And what we had to do then is instead, because we didn't have the journal and the assurance from the journal and the publisher of how this research had been had been verified, we had to go through each of these publications which appeared in a predatory journal and do our own verification of it. So we looked at, what other articles this particular researcher had done, how their voice was being seen within their institutions, and kind of used the reputation of the author to show that this research was legitimate. Because I'm sure you can think of examples of where good journals go bad. That doesn't mean that the research goes bad, does it? And so it was a really interesting case for me where, we wanted to do the systematic review. We couldn't find it in their usual places. And so we had to get a little bit creative on looking at where we could find the results that we knew were out there. So that's what I mean by look at the researchers, So when you're doing a systematic review, report on the north-south split of what your findings are. Report, if you can, on gender, report on language, be absolutely upfront with how biased your results are, because they are. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'll come to that. But you can also look at the participants. So I can think of a story now. I came across a diet that addressed a particular female problem. And this diet has got, I don't know how many books, websites. It's making a whole lot of money pushing a low sugar diet to kind of address a particular illness. What it didn't have was the research. And I started digging through this, and I dug and I dug and I dug and I dug, and I eventually found one journal article, which had 32 participants, if I remember correctly, of a very, very small age group. I think they were kind of between 35 and 45. They were all white. And it only looked at one kind of manifestation of this illness, where this particular one had heaps. And so I thought to myself, wow, how could you create almost an industry on so little research? And that's something that's, for the health sciences, particularly important, is who are the participants? For the longest time, it was only, white men that were studied. It's actually fairly recently that we're starting to look at how things are different for different people. And for a South African, that might be pretty obvious because, having lived through at least part of apartheid, the experiences that we have on the history of our country are so wildly different that we know that we all come from a different place. And that means that everyone's voice is still valid. It's not just one voice. And so when you are looking at what you're including and what you're excluding, always be transparent about it. Make sure you're saying why you're including, for example, predatory publishing, predatory journals, as I did, because I know that would have been seen, if I just said, oh, we're including these journals, my reviewers were going to say, well, these are all predatory. What are you doing? So I had to explain why I was including them and excluding perhaps the grey literature that I did exclude. So one of the frameworks that is very, very common in systematic reviews is called PRISMA, preferred reporting, something, can't remember. And the link is in the notes as well. So they've got some lovely frameworks and some lovely checklists that any systematic review or meta-analysis researcher can use. Representation. So this is kind of what I was talking about with the participants. And so here's some tips on what you can do. So if you find a gap, a lack of representation, it can be a really, really good find. I found this in my PhD. So I found, because I had a kind of mapped my literature reviews and mapped the findings, I found very, very distinct gaps. And with my PhD, the empirical section of it, I was able to fill some of those gaps and was able to show my examiners a very, very clear contribution to knowledge. And so in the comments from my examiners, they really said that was the strongest point of my PhD. So lack of representation is not a bad thing. It really isn't. It can show that there's a gap in the literature that needs to be addressed and give an impetus behind the research that you're trying to do. My tip about going beyond normal inclusion, that is kind of thinking about including things like the predatory publications when we couldn't find what we knew existed within peer-reviewed journals. But you could also go beyond that. You could include peer-reviewed journal articles. Grey journal articles as well. Newspaper articles and so on. So you don't have to limit yourself. If you find a lack, that is a reason to go beyond what you are looking at. And when you write up your results, watch your language. Be very careful when you say, yes, this will work because there's 3,000 articles that shows that it has, when your particular context is very, very different. So really don't overstep your conclusions. Don't overgeneralize. Be careful how you say that this works for everyone when you've only got results that represent a small fraction of lived experiences or research, etc. Okay, just doing a time check. All right. So what else could you do? Firstly, publish, and publish wildly. So the example I had of my negative result that never got published, I am actually going to make a commitment here to go and publish it. So it won't be in a journal article because the results are about 10 years old, but I'm going to put it on my repository, which is an open access repository, and I'll be able to share that out, with the world. And there are many examples of where you can do this. So I did have a check with University of the Western Cape, and there is a data repository that you can use. Your librarian can help you there. And so get your results out there, even if you did a study and you never got to write it up as a journal article, and you've just got a draft, you just got a conference presentation, you've just got a handful of data, put it out there for people to find. And don't worry about the format. In fact, the more diverse the formats can be, the more you are likely to access different audiences. So just put your voice out there as much as you possibly can. The other tip that I have for you is something called the CARE principles. So the link again is in the notes. And this came up in dealing with data related to Indigenous persons, but I have found it so useful in all kinds of research that deal with human participants. Because if you think about doing any kind of research should benefit more than the science. It should benefit the participants of the researchers and all the other stakeholders. And so thinking about your research as a collective benefit is really of use. Authority to control. So you as a researcher often have control over your own research. But what about your participants? You know, beyond being able to withdraw the information from the study, do they have a say in how their data is being presented? Do they have a say in who's presenting it? And so engaging these other stakeholders, these other voices within your research gives them this authority to control. And I think that that's just being a responsible researcher. You know, it's considering the other, as you should. And the E is for ethics. I'm not going to go into great detail about that one. And so then to close, I just want to say that I think in Africa, there's a huge advantage to this because we've got the spirit of Ubuntu, which is baked into a lot of our social interactions. We are used to thinking about the other and not just about ourselves as researchers. And so if we could get more of that philosophy, more of that spirit into our researcher, I think we could go a very, very long way in addressing some of these biases and bringing voices to those that are silent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lara, for your great presentation and all the useful tips you've given us about conducting systematic reviews. It's really information that we can make use of and it's helped me also to, you know, in my learning about systematic reviews. So thank you very much for all your for making the time to come and address us today. And given your family situation and your busy schedule, I know that you have to leave soon. So we're going to have the question answer session. If there are any questions for Dr. Skelly, please do type it in the chat or raise your hand if you've got something specific that you would like to ask. I'm just going to the chat here. Yeah, it's just so far, you know, great insights, very useful. Thank you, Dr. Skelly. Thank you so much, Dr. Lara. Your presentation was informative. Are there any, from the audience here today, are there any comments or specific questions you would like to ask Lara?
I want to say something.
Okay, I see Gerald would like to say something.
But this is not a question. It's not a question, Dr. Skelly. It is just a comment. I want to say, yeah, thank you, Dr. Skelly, for that nice provocative presentation. It was really an eye-opener. It is for me, it was so great to see that you and Shyama just come after each other. Shyama open up and then you come after her with your keynote. Because when I was listening to you two, it really connects because Shyama, I know that she wrote some systematic reviews. She wrote systematic reviews. She was practically involved and she is the main head behind this committee. She came up with the idea and really bring it up for us to come establish this type of committee. And you that did your PhD and was also taught us in the postgrad when you're lecturing there about systematic reviews and make us aware of the importance of systematic reviews. So really for me, it is really a nice way to see how you two can build, how it really built up to the next step and what you two has to say. So thank you very much for both of you for those provocative statements and presentations that you did. And really, it is really good. Thank you so much.
Very welcome, Mr. Louw. It's an absolute pleasure. And when I discovered the method of the systematic review, I thought to myself, where has this been my whole life? Because it really is a great methodology that can help make sense of the thousands and millions of journal articles that are out there and find the gaps because I think in research, that's where the magic lies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skelly. Are there any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I think, yes, thank you so much, Lara, again, for your presentation, for joining us today. It's been great having you, and we look forward to communicating with you as we go on, and touching base with you every now and then, if we need advice or guidance. So thank you so much, and and I hope that your child is going to be much better soon. So you're welcome to excuse yourself whenever you would like to. So without further,
there's something in the chat. Just read it from, I think, from your cousin. Oh, there's two things, Sylvester.
oh yes, no, I did read those already. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Skelly. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce our next speaker, who is Andrew Ennis. Just to tell you a little bit about him, he is a faculty librarian for Arts and Humanities at UWC. So he's one of my colleagues. He holds 2 postgraduate degrees. He's got a Master of Arts in Language, Literature, and Modernity, and also an MPhil in Digital Curation. So he's very well qualified, and I know that he's got a lot of experience in conducting systematic reviews. So as a professionally designated librarian, through our LIASA, which is our Library and Information Association of South Africa, he brings a well-rounded interdisciplinary approach to academic librarianship. So welcome, Andrew, and I'm going to now hand over to you. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Let me just get my, what's it called up, my presentation. Okay, full screen. Okay, there we are, I think. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, thanks.
Okay, let's get back to this. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Ennis, and today I'm going to present on my research I did for my master's dissertation in digital curation. My research explores the landscape of academic studies on enterprise social networks. So what I think is most relevant to this particular event is the methodology, of course, as opposed to my findings. Just to say that I discovered this methodology myself during lockdown. I was going to do research on social media in the workplace, and I was going to do research with real people, and then lockdown happened. I had to refigure out the whole thing. So I came across a systematic review, but I was learning about the process as I went along. And so in some ways, the research sort of reflects like that I was, learning and then sort of having to learn from what I've done and then maybe change it or so on. So this is an example of how a systematic review can be used in a sort of less traditional sense. So I adapted the systematic review methodology to a humanities context in order to analyze the paradigms of research in a specified study area. Specifically, I identified the extent of critical social research in the realm of enterprise social network studies. So my research focused on enterprise social networks, or ESNs, and that refers basically to the study of social media in the workplace. So ESN research examines the application of social media or social networks within organizational settings. So this study distinguished between outward-facing use, which involves engaging with customers, stakeholders, or outside organizations, with internal use by employees for communication internally with colleagues, managers, leaders, or the organization. So this study focused on the inward-facing use because it directly impacts employees' well-being, their interpersonal relationships, and their relationship with the larger world. So the study distinguished between two types of research. We have critical social research and administrative research. So administrative research, according to social media critic Christian Fuchs, is administrative research typically adopts a positivist approach within the internet studies and focuses on enhancing organizational efficiency and effectiveness. In contrast, critical social research is rooted in critical media and information studies and addresses broader social and political issues, focusing on power dynamics, societal impacts, and ethical considerations. So the concern highlighted by Fuchs and others is that critical research is marginalized in favor of administrative research. And so this sort of set my goal to map out the ESN research landscape and to see to what extent critical social research figures into this area of research. So the main objective was to evaluate the extent and trends of critical social research compared to administrative research on ESN use over time, and to understand the dominant themes and methodologies within this area of research. Specifically, I wanted to know what percentage of ESN research are examples of critical social research in comparison with administrative. Second, what are the common methodologies for the research paradigms? And third, what are the main thematic areas being discussed from a critical point of view? And finally, are there trends over time? So the study falls between what Grant and Booth's categories of systematic reviews as somewhere between as a systematized review and an overview. So I describe this combination as a systematized overview, as it incorporates elements of both the systematic review methodology and the overview approach. So a systematized review, according to Grant and Booth, falls short of being a full systematic review, however, incorporates elements of the process and is conceptually aligned with it. While the term overview is generic and can describe different reviews with varying degrees of systematicity, the term conveys the intent to comprehensively summarize a topic, considering the characteristics of the research. This hybrid approach allowed me to use the systematic search and screening processes of a full systematic review, while providing the flexibility needed to analyze and describe the characteristics of the research gathered. So I started with Cochrane review guidelines, which I used to develop a comprehensive multi-database search strategy. So this involved defining precise research questions, search strings and protocols, conducting extensive searches, evaluating study quality, and synthesizing the findings to generate reliable conclusions. Instead of the standard PICO framework, I used PICO with a small o, which swaps out comparison and outcome for context, making it work for my qualitative synthesis. So as such, my population was research articles on ESNs, my phenomena of interest was critical social research, and my context was the broader academic landscape of enterprise social network studies. So to discern critical social research from the rest of the research, I adapted a typology from Cooley et al., who created categories to find critical social research within their area of research, which slips my head right now. But I'll discuss this typology in greater detail when I talk about how I coded the articles. Then finally, I used a reflexive thematic analysis to uncover the central themes within the body of work. Central thematic analysis, a la Braun and Clark. So as such, the study took the form of a multi-stage process. I began with a comprehensive search across 5 major social science databases for articles published between 2009 and 2021. After screening for duplicates and applying my inclusion criteria, I was left with a final data set of 176 articles. I then coded each article using my critical social research, administrative research typology, and performed a thematic analysis to identify the key trends and topics. So the strategy I determined to be the most effective involved conducting individual searches for each term, coupled with basic restrictions. So instead of making a long search term, adding all my things together, I found that this allowed me to make quite precise searches across databases without having to worry about the particular affordances of each database. So I use search terms such as, I use, I think, 7 search terms. I had enterprise social networks, social media in the workplace, enterprise 2.0, enterprise social software, corporate social network, corporate social intranet, and then ESNs. Each term was searched individually, the results were collated, and duplicates were removed. So this approach, while taking longer, provides a more replicable process, which is preferable in some ways to using a complex search string that ensures consistent results across various databases with different search features. So the limitations I used when searching the databases was the years 2009 to 2021, language English, format peer-reviewed journal articles, and with full text available. Subsequently, the results were exported in the RIS format to align with the requirements of the Rayan review software that I was using. So this table presents a number of search hits across the 5 different academic databases for each of the selected terms. So enterprise social network, social media in the workplace, and several variations incorporating enterprise, corporate, and social software or social network. So notably, enterprise social networks yielded a high number of results in Scopus, whereas ESNs had the most significant number of hits in the Web of Science database. The search for terms like enterprise social software and corporate social software yielded fewer results across all databases, indicating that there might be less common or more specific terms in the literature. ESN did get a lot of hits, but that was also where I picked up a lot of erroneous articles that I had to remove for things like echo state networks, which I think was part of machine learning research. So that came up a lot. However, it also did get a lot of results. I found in the beginning that something like social media in the workplace yielded very few results. And until I found the term enterprise social software or enterprise social networks, I wasn't actually finding a lot of research for my subject matter in the first place. So that really was a lesson in finding the right keywords to find your research at all. So as I was only one author working on this review, which I have learned is not ideal, but I had to do it. I conducted the screening in multiple stages, slowly reducing the number of articles for review. I used Rayan software. I was going to get some screenshots of my reviews that are still archived on the platform, but the interface seems to have changed greatly since I used it, and I don't think it would be a sort of accurate reflection of my actions. I still need to get used to how it works again. I'll have a look at it again. So first I did a preliminary screening. This trial was conducted on 1,817 articles from 4 databases, excluding Scopus, initially, to familiarize myself with the software and refine the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So this resulted in 323 articles and informed the decision to include the larger results extracted from Scopus in the full review. Then I began screening process in earnest. In the first screening, I uploaded the search results from the different databases, and then I screened each database results by themselves. That was removing duplicates and screening the titles and abstracts against the criteria that I had defined, which was basically articles about enterprise social network use internally in the workplace by employees. The second screening was I took the articles, and this time I had them all together, and then I separated them by years instead of by database. And then I went through them all, screening by year. So then those were put into another review together. The remaining articles were organized by publication year to streamline the process. A further review of these 1,024 articles, checking abstracts and, if needed, full text, refined the pool to 850 articles. Then the third screening involved full text reviews of the 850 articles to ensure they specifically focused on internal employee use of ESNs. These excluded papers on subjects like customer communication, because it'll be outward facing. I got a lot of the eco-state network stuff out, all those that only peripherally mention ESN use, but focus on something like knowledge management as the overall focus of the paper. So for my final sample for analysis, given the scope of the work, I was advised to, and what I did is I took articles from 3 equidistant years. I took from 2010, 2015, and 2020, which landed with 192 articles. So after some final checks during coding, 176 articles formed the final body for thematic analysis. Okay, so the coding process. With the results of the third screening phase, a sample of 192 articles from 2010, 2015, and 2020 was selected to be coded for analysis. This sample was reduced to 180 after further inspection, and another 4 removed during the coding process, leading to a total of 176 articles in the final analysis. These articles were then coded against critical social research criteria and categories, the typology I developed, which I'll go over in the next slide. So both administrative research and critical social research groups were further coded with additional fields, which I'll also look at the next slide, providing a comprehensive framework for understanding the depth and breadth of the research. The final stage before data analysis was to export the coded reviews as CSVs and then import the CSVs into Excel to clean the data. Once the data was imported into Excel, necessary to clean, normalize, and sort the data into columns, create a key, quantify the data by turning no's and yeses into noughts and ones, and so on. Okay, so typologies are useful for summarizing complex data. The typology used in this study served as a classification system, grouping research based on defining characteristics and taking the form of a series of criteria and then categories. So these criteria and categories are listed in the table on the left. Each paper was first examined to see if it fit one of the 5 types of critical social research criteria. A paper could be an example of one or more of the 5 criteria. Articles fitting these criteria are then also compared to the documents that fall under number 6, which is administrative research. So the categories indicate where the research addresses critical social research issues such as challenging structures of power, questioning societal norms, or critiquing the instrumental use of social research and technology. The articles were then coded for additional information outlined under categories. The further coding on the table on the right. This further coding included bibliographic details such as year and author, also methodological approaches, like case studies, for instance, or a literature review, the data analysis methods, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods, and also the topics or themes and theories employed if they used a specific theory. So I analyzed these critical social research and administrative research papers separately to understand their specific traits. I also used Shannon and Simpson diversity indices to measure the variety and frequency of theories and themes. So the Shannon index measures uncertainty in a category prediction, whereas the Simpson index calculates the probability that 2 articles are of a different theme So using these illustrates the evolving trends and differences between critical social research and administrative research. This approach gives a clear overview of the field's evolution and is a method for tracking future trends. So my findings. So first, the landscape of ESN research is overwhelmingly dominated by administrative research. This was somewhat to be expected. However, administrative research, which made up almost 80% of the studies analyzed. So in contrast, critical social research comprised just 21%. However, critical social research is not in decline. In fact, we see a very clear and positive growth trend from 2010, where there was only 5.5% of the research what could be considered an example of critical social research. And by 2020, it had risen to over 21% of the conducted research. So this challenges the narrative that critical social scholarship is being edged out, and instead shows that it has a stable and significant presence in the field. So a deeper look at the research also found that quantitative methods are most common, but interestingly, there is not a strict divide between quantitative methods with administrative research and critical social research, as both paradigms use a mixture of methods. So we also saw the field maturing in another way, as the explicit use of theory has tripled since 2010, and the diversity of theories being used has also increased. So why does this matter? First, this research is a practical demonstration that evidence synthesis is not limited to medical or quantitative research and can be adapted to answer complex interpretive questions. This methodology allowed me to move beyond summarizing research content and instead to analyze the paradigms that shape a field of study. So I believe this systematized overview, along with the typology developed to classify critical social research, provides a transferable model that other researchers in humanities could use to systematically map the occurrence of critical social research in their own fields of inquiry. So in conclusion, by adapting the tools of evidence synthesis, my research provides a clear data-driven map of the ESN research field. It confirms that administrative efficiency-focused paradigm is indeed dominant, but also highlights the vital and growing presence of a more critical human-centered approach. This methodological bridge between the systematic and the interpretive may allow for new systematic studies in the humanities. Thank you for your time and attention. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was a very interesting presentation. It's always good to hear from somebody who's done a systematic review themselves and taking us through the whole process and eventually, you know, until you get to the actual findings of your research and the impact of it. So it's really great to hear that. And I know that we're all very grateful to have you as part of our evidence synthesis committee, given your experience with your master's studies. And yeah, thank you for really enlightening us today. It's been very informative. So I'm going to open. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, we're going to have the Q&A for all the speakers, Andrew, and the speakers that follow. We're going to do the Q&A at the end of all the presentations before we close the webinar. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce, let me just check the chat. Yeah, it's just Vuyuseka, that's great, Andrew, well done, and Godwin, good job, Andrew. So thanks so much again, Andrew. I'm going to now introduce our next speaker, who is Faiza Tufi. Oh, sorry. It's going to be Godwin Dzangare. So welcome, Godwin. Godwin Dzangare is a graduate of the Research Institute of Science and Technology Information at Jiangsu University. His area of research is information literacy, focusing on digital and health information literacy. So over to you, Godwin.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. I'm enjoying the seminar and learning a lot from everybody, especially when it comes to literature review, because it's one of the most important things that as a researcher you get to use. However, in my presentation, it's going to be mainly focused on a preliminary study that we conducted, that includes a focus on the adoption of AI to facilitate inclusion through focusing on assessing how readability can be advanced through adopting AI. Let me try to share my screen first so that at least I'm able to stop. All right. I hope I'm able to. I wasn't expecting. Is it possible for someone to is it possible for my presentation to be shared from that end?
Okay. Just hold on a minute. I'll just check with Gerald Louw and see if we can share that presentation from our side. Just give me a minute or two. Thanks, Godwin.
All right. Oh, okay. I think I'm able to. I hope everybody is able to see it.
Yes, yes, it's perfect. Thanks. We can
Okay,
see it.
all right. It's okay.
Perhaps just put it in presentation mode.
All right, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try to. All right, I hope everybody is able to see that. So our main focus on our study was looking into how we can adopt AI to enhance readability, focusing on health information. And we then focused on the neglected tropical disease information specifically to ensure that at least we minimize our scope. And one of the most important things about artificial intelligence at the moment is how it's being used it's how it can be used to facilitate evidence synthesis. In the whole in understanding how readability is also linked to evidence synthesis, there's a framework called the 3Rs framework by Lagai, who made an emphasis that there are three elements that are required to facilitate evidence synthesis, which includes the rigor, the relevance of the research, as well as it being able to be understood through facilitating readability, making it easier for the audience. So in our study, we tried to look into how artificial intelligence can be used to help people or research dissemination, making it much easier through making the content user-friendly, timely, as well as credibility. In Zimbabwe, and our audience is Zimbabwean, in Zimbabwe, there are over about 10 million people who are vulnerable to neglected tropical disease. And unfortunately, in as much as the World Health Organization was able to make an emphasis on these type of diseases, honing on the emphasis of them being tackled, they continuously get neglected. And as information practitioners, as well as health service workers, there are so many ways that we can facilitate the fight or help with the fight of these neglected diseases beyond just waiting for aid, as well as medical attention. There's also a tool that we can use mainly focusing on literacy. And through literacy, we've realized that most of the resources that are shared by information practitioners as well as the other entities outside of Zimbabwe, or our scope as a globe or as a continent, they kind of neglect how each country has a specific literacy rate and how they're able to understand content that is being disseminated. So we often find that organizations or institutes just channel out information without understanding specifically what the literacy level or how each community requires or looks for information. So adopting artificial intelligence at the moment as a tool that advances readability is now quite important. And we then looked into 4 specific diseases such as bilharzia, blinding trachoma, elephantitis, as well as intestinal worms as the 4 main ones. And we understand that in as much as there are so many tools that health service workers and information practitioners are able to use, such as ChatGPT and Gemini, these are not easily accessible. However, there's one which is quite accessible, which is Meta AI, which is open to over 5.2 million users of WhatsApp, which makes up 33% of the population. So it's quite important that we make use of such tools. And there are several recommendations that were made by, for example, one Moyo Ndlovu, who stated that such tools should be adopted to ensure that we use them as important tools to facilitate knowledge sharing and combat NTDs, which are the neglected tropical diseases. Health literacy is important because as much as without a full understanding of diseases, without fully simplifying information that is being channeled out, it hits a brick wall. So it's important for people to at least incorporate any readability tools or elements to make sure that we simplify public health materials and match the general reading levels. In Zimbabwe, literacy level is close to 93%. It's 93.7%, and it's based off of the grade 3 level at the age of the reading grade 3 level at the age of about 15 years. And this is matched up to 93.7. However, the public health material that is being channeled out to most people, it's a little bit complex, and improving comprehension would allow a simplification of the content as well as making sure that people are able to understand information. One of the main problems is that our main problems in our study that we found was that although the Zimbabwean we do have in Zimbabwe, although they have what we call an NTD master plan, it's also important that health information and health communication and education material be proven. There be health initiatives that allow the involvement of stakeholders to ensure that they understand and that they understand the education material that they are given, so that we build on and advance the health information that they get, so that the health information sips through to the local level. So in our study, our main focus or our objectives were to determine if AI actually improves readability of health information, specifically the NTD information, as well as just examine the converted material to make sure that it's actually accurate. And during our literature review, we looked into some of the things that and we found that most of it is donor initiative. There's a limited funding as well as shortage of health workers. And although there is access to information, the information that is currently available, it's not simplified to match the literacy and general understanding for the rest of the population in Zimbabwe. So we looked into that, and we also understood that in as much as the advantage of is high literacy rate, they still need to share information, which is quite understandable. And we also did understand that one of the major tools that people can adopt is Meta AI, which can be used to simplify health information. So our methodology was specifically to start off with selecting the information that we need to simplify or that is currently available. And some of the information that is actually out there that tackles NTDs is through what is one organization called the Fund Trust Organization. It helps fight NTDs. And then we looked into how we can create an AI prompt that would be used. And our prompt mainly was just as simple as simplify this text to Zimbabwean grade 3 level, reading level. And our assessment, and then our next step was to assess the readability through 3 main scales. The main focus scales, however, we then focused on 2 main scales, the FRE scale, which is called the Physical Reading Ease Scale, which it's based in America. However, it has the standardized grade level that it has. So it's much easier to align it with grade 3 level. So whichever material that you get, you're able to specifically know that this material is meant for grade 3, as well as the FKG. It's the FKGL. It has a scale of between 0 and 100, and the simplification of the material, you'll be able to see that the material is most probably 0 being the least complicated, 100 being the most complicated information. So you'll be able to gauge based off of the percentage to see whether the information is quite complex or it has been simplified, looking at things like syllables, the words, etc. Then after that, we then had to run some conclusions to see what were the final results through an easy comparison of the converted text and the original text. Okay. Some of the sampled of before we get to the sample of the text, we used a site called readable.com. This site comprises of all of the scales, and it's able to, after we ran our prompt and got the results, for example, bilharzia has a scientific name, and the text that is currently available on the website for Fundworm on Fund Trust has scientific terms. If it's then simplified, you can see that, or if it's then converted by AI, you can see that it simplifies the scientific term to bilharzia, and it simplifies the text into simple text such as bilharzia is a sickness caused by tiny worms, from a complicated information that is channeled out, which specifies that infection with parasitic worms. And even on blind intrachoma, you can see that it's the original text was bacterial infection spread by common houseflies. A grade 3 would not understand this text, and if words such as sickness and blind and flies are adopted or used, they will be able to understand the information, as well as other words like parasitic disease, which can be converted to simple illness, and other texts that were converted. And a typical report of this converted text looks like this, with multiple scales that show you how the original text was. The FKGL here shows the grade 3 level converted text and the rating of the overall conversion, as well as simple skills as well, such as IELTS, which is also commonly known. We know that even the CEFR, which is B1, which is the simplest understandable level of English, as well as IELTS, you're able to see that the IELTS level is now 4 to 5, which shows that the text was converted and it's now understandable. And as the report also shows at the end that the text aimed at a general population, the audience around it could be around 8 people of 10 who can now understand the converted text. Some of the percentage of the change that we could see from the original text to the converted text, you could see that the change percentage was around between 60 to 80%. This is a huge change when you see it from the original text to the converted text, which shows that AI is possible, the adoption of AI in converting text to make it simplified to its simplification is actually quite important. We see that the FKG, which shows the grade levels, we have text that was originally scanned by AI, which shows that it was about grade 13, yet the general population needs, or the general population literacy rate is grade 3 level, and it can be converted to, although it highlighted like grade 4, it only managed to convert it to grade 4. The text is now a little bit understandable, which with a 68 percentage of change. Here we also saw that text on elephantitis had been scanned and reflected at grade 17, which is beyond, most probably the text was university level of understanding, but it was simplified and converted to about grade 3 understanding, which showed about 80% of conversion to make it a bit simplified and understandable. This is much more of a graphical a picture, illustration of how the simplification happened, which is over beyond half, and we can see from the scale with an outstanding on information on elephantitis, which was quite complicated but simplified quite well. So AI, at the end of the day, we understand that AI is adopting meta AI actually improves public health education material to make it quite understandable to grade 3 level. We also observed that readability is unlikely to have occurred by any chance if it wasn't converted. And it also, AI supports better comprehension and empowers the community to understand health information much more better. And then if information is simplified, we understand that it creates a portal of inclusion to make sure that people are able to understand health information. So our recommendations were health workers and information practitioners should surely adopt AI to advance readability. Meta AI, which is accessible via WhatsApp, can simplify NTD information and advance health literacy, facilitating inclusion. So we our study proves that and also shares that health workers as well as information practitioners in different communities should adopt AI to facilitate readability and understanding of health information. And other things that we then realized that AI can now facilitate information translation. We know that as Doc highlighted earlier, research mainly is mostly in English. And if we can open up for translation to native language, it creates a broader opportunity. It creates a broader opportunity for accessibility and inclusivity, especially English not being the first language in Zimbabwe and other countries as well. That's all from me. I hope everybody understood the simpler study, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Godwin, for your interesting presentation. I like the way your research brought in AI, which is very much, popular these days, and also the WhatsApp. So you really are reaching the community using the tools that they are using. I just wanted to, I forgot when I introduced Godwin, to just introduce as well his co-author, Tabu Ayibongwa Gulu, who I think is also in this this webinar. But I just wanted to introduce him. He's a graduate of the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, and his area of research obviously overlaps with Godwin's. It's health information and records management, focusing on information governance and retrieval systems. So thank you very much to Godwin and Tabo for your for the research that you've done, and for sharing your insights and your findings with us. Obviously, health information literacy is really critical to communities such as those in Zimbabwe, and it's great that you've done this research. Let me just see if there's anything in the chat. Vuyuseka just said your contribution is appreciated. Godwin, well done. And Petronella says at Harare Institute of Technology, we have Frenity, an AI chatbot for native languages of Shona and Ndebele. So that's quite interesting. Okay, the Q&A, any comments or questions we will handle at the end. So I'm going to proceed to introduce our last speaker for today, who is Faiza Tufi. Faiza is a registered psychological counselor in private practice and is currently pursuing her doctorate studies at the University of the Western Cape. She holds a master's degree in psychology and has extensive experience in educational management, staff training, learner intervention programs, and counseling across community, private, and corporate sectors. She's a member of the Golden Key International Honor Society, and her research and professional interests focus on learner well-being and well-being interventions for educational settings. So welcome, Faiza, and I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you. Sorry, Faisa, yes, you're muted. There we are, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me and for being part of this important webinar. I must have learned quite a bit. I am currently busy with a systematic review, and there's been quite a bit of insight that I've taken from the previous speakers. As mentioned, I am a PhD candidate at the University of the Western Cape in the Department of Psychology. Today, I will be sharing a bit about my personal experiences accessing the library databases while conducting my systematic review. So my focus is on the accessibility of the databases. This is part of my doctoral studies, which I will mention later on what my research topic is. The purpose of this short talk will be to reflect on what the process was like for me, the challenges I encountered, the strategies I used to navigate them, and what I've learned along the way. Access to the library databases might sound like a technical or administrative issue, but it's actually central to the credibility and rigor of a systematic review. Without proper access, researchers risk missing key studies, which can affect the overall quality and comprehensiveness of their findings. A systematic review, as mentioned previously also, is a research method that involves identifying, evaluating, and synthesizing all available studies related to a specific topic. In my case, my review focuses on the best practices and implementation strategies of well-being intervention programs for high school learners. Because this is a fairly specific and important research area, I needed to access a broad range of databases across disciplines. So amongst which I identified, together with my supervisor, about 9 databases, which includes EBSCOhost, Scopus, Taylor and Francis, Cybernet, PubMed, and Web of Science. Each of these databases indexes different journals, so comprehensive coverage is essential to ensure that no relevant study is overlooked. However, as I soon discovered, accessing all these databases consistently and efficiently was not as straightforward as it might sound. When I began the database searches, some resources were immediately available through the university's library portal. In fact, I could access all my databases through the university's library portal. Some of them, however, was more user-friendly than others. So like EBSCOhost and Scopus allowed me to download all my results without much problem. But as the process unfolded, several challenges began to surface. Firstly, I realized that not all the databases allowed large download of citations. They had restrictions and policies around data mining processes. For example, SAGE, which is particularly important for psychological research, allowed only 10 downloads at a time. So you could only download 10 citations, and there was a maximum of 1,000 downloads that I could do. And that was despite the fact that I had, when I did my literature search, or when I did the search, SAGE yielded about over 15,000 hits. So unfortunately, because of it being only allowing 10 downloads at a time and a maximum of 1,000, this would not have been feasible for me. So I had to choose another database or substitute SAGE with another database, and in consultation with the faculty librarian as well as my supervisor, we chose Taylor and Francis. And with Taylor and Francis, there was also a significant amount of hits. The results was quite large. I had over 16,000, but there was also restrictions. And Taylor and Francis only allowed 2,000 downloads per search strategy. So I also encountered issues with exporting results and managing references. Some databases exported citations in formats that didn't integrate smoothly with the systematic review online tools. And this added extra manual work to an already intensive process. It is important to open an account with each database because this will allow you more functionalities such as exporting larger files, saving your searches. So that is one tip I would say. Another challenge was that even when access was technically available, there were practical barriers. Some databases had inconsistent interfaces, so meaning that search terms you had to be changed, or you had to adapt it slightly. Also, you could not include all your search terms, and there was also limitations in terms of using wildcards. And the filters work differently across the platforms. This made it challenging to maintain a consistent search strategy, which is critical requirement in a systematic review. To overcome this, of course, I documented my search strategies that I used for each database. And then there was also inevitable technical issues such as time delays in getting support, because when I was confronted with these challenges with regards to the certain databases, I consulted with the faculty librarian, and we then contacted the support centers of the databases. But receiving support was delayed, and this was primarily probably because of the international time zones. Many of them are situated in America. The overall impact of these challenges was quite significant. They led to delays in the title and abstract screening phase, and at times it felt like more effort was going into managing access and logistics than into actually engaging with the research content. To navigate these challenges, I had to adopt a mix of persistence, creativity, and collaboration. I reached out to the faculty librarian, as I mentioned earlier, who were incredibly supportive. They helped me identify alternative databases and guided me through advanced search options to make the most of what was available. This also assisted with the process of converting the files into RIS files, because depending on the online systematic review tool that you will be using, the files that when you export your results, it must also be converted into specific files. And to do that, I also had to make use of reference manager tools such as EndNote and Mendeley and Zotero. So the process is not very straightforward. To stay organized, I documented each database search, including the access date and the search term, and the procedure I followed to maintain transparency and replicability. This experience also reminded me of how vital it is to the role of the librarians are in the research process, not just as gatekeepers of resources, but as collaborators who play an essential role in supporting academic work. Reflecting on this process, I've learned several important lessons. Firstly, it's essential to start the database access process early. So to take into account that what I thought was going to be a few days, take me a few days or even a week or two, landed up taking me almost 2 months. So they are invaluable sources. So while before you plan to begin your search, some access issues can take weeks to resolve. You have to bear that in mind. Secondly, build a relationship with the faculty librarian as early as possible. They are an invaluable source of expertise and can often suggest resources you might not have known existed. And finally, I believe that there is a strong need for training workshops for postgraduate students on effective database searching and the systematic review processes. Many challenges can be avoided through awareness and skill building. Ultimately, this journey reminded me that access to knowledge is the foundation of meaningful research. Ensuring that researchers have equitable and efficient access to the resources they need to is essential for the advancement of scholarship, especially in developing research context. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope that there were some helpful tips and also that it will just identifying and discussing highlighting the challenges, that it will help future researchers.
Thank you so much, Faiza, for your interesting talk and for sharing your experiences with us. I also like the fact that you highlighted the importance of the faculty librarian and making contact with your faculty librarian to get assistance with this whole process, and also of starting early and giving enough time. So that is, and also highlighting the need for training to be given to researchers and students that are planning to do systematic review. So thank you so much, and for sharing openly your challenges and the high and the low points, and thank you for being part of our webinar today. It's been great having you. Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Very pleasure. You're welcome. Okay, before we go to the Q&A, I just wanted to introduce Professor Fahima Kimi-Danse, who's going to be our moderator today. She's going to wrap up the discussions and close the webinar for us. So I just wanted to introduce her now. She is an associate professor in community oral health at University of the Western Cape in the Faculty of Dentistry. She has a unique academic journey that spans areas such as mathematical statistics, dentistry, and biostatistics as well. So welcome and thank you for being here, Professor Kimi-Danse. And I don't know if you want to start the discussion now, and then obviously we can take any questions or comments related to any of the presentations today. So over to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for your attention and for staying with us through this very interesting presentations. We've explored a wide range of topics from fairness in evidence in AI, ethics, and access. And then what I want to highlight is that the one thing that connects everything that we're talking about today is whose evidence counts and how can we make sure it's fair, inclusive, and ethical. So our first topic was on whose evidence counts, fairness, representation, and integrity. And we spoke about the geographic divide, about the global north and the global south, about gender, where males are more prevalently published rather than females, that publications in English language is more published than in any other language, how positive results are more likely to be published, how publishing publications of larger sample size are more prevalent, and how conference proceedings aren't as largely published as opposed to journal articles. So we want to know if you do have a publication that you have to highlight your limitations so that it can highlight gaps in the literature. You have to say that it's not representative of people in the global south, that it doesn't contain grey literature, or that it only considered the languages like as in English languages. In our next talk by Andrew Ennis, we spoke about the critical social research and AI ethics, opportunities and risks. He did a very novel and innovative way of applying systematic reviews, which I found very interesting. He used systematic reviews in an adaptive way, using enterprise social networks like Slacks or Teams, or any other example. We didn't really ask him what the different types that we could find, but we will ask him soon. And it looked at the differences between critical social research and administrative research, where critical social research looked at the actual individuals that are using this enterprise social networks, as opposed to the administrative research, which looked at the organization and how it affected the organization. And he spoke about how there were differences between the systematized overview versus systematic reviews. So with systematic reviews, we're looking at population intervention comparator outcome, which would be used in a clinical trial. But this was very different. He was looking at the population context and what is it the I stood for? Context and oh, I'm gonna lie to you, but he didn't look at the usual PICO element that we normally use. But they were more interested in how does this affect workers, and we should be asking whose voices are heard, because in a normal systematic review, we're not really concentrating on how people feel. We're more interested in an outcome. So does the systematic reviews that we doesn't consider culture, and it may not have, it can have geographic and gender subgroups, but our interpretation may be affected. So our next topic was about health communications and equity in Zimbabwe. And this is another fascinating example from Zimbabwe, where AI is being used to make health information easier to read and understand, especially for people who are interested, who have been exposed to neglected tropical diseases. And we saw how AI can be used to make content more user-friendly at a grade 3 level reading capacity, actually, and to adopt AI to enhance readability of these resources. And usually we find that resources are not user-friendly and they're not easily understood, especially by allied healthcare workers who are not necessarily trained in in a formative setting. So we want to include, he was basically saying that we want to include different populations who are at grade level literacy levels, grade 3 literacy levels, by using Meta AI, which is in WhatsApp. I have a few questions for him, but we'll ask that as soon as we are done with this wrap up. And then Ms. Faiza Tofi, excellent overview of her challenges that that she experienced using her literature, her systematic review. She mentioned that each database had to be specifically tailor-made, that wildcards weren't always accessible in different databases. Wildcards are like, if you were interested in human and human, you would say human star, which would also include humans as a plural. She was having challenges of uploading her downloaded files into a RIS format, because PubMed doesn't allow your searches to be saved as a RIS format. She had to use a reference management system to convert her downloaded searches into a RIS format so that it could be uploaded into the different data systematic review management systems like Covidence or Rayan. And she highlighted the roles of librarians as collaborators and not just as tools which can be used. They should be seen as very efficient collaborators. I remember our previous librarian for the dental faculty was Mr. Farid Davis, and he played a central role initially when systematic reviews came out in the UWC's usage in 2018, and he was part of our team to teach our researchers in 2018 on how to use systematic reviews in master's thesis and as publications. So we want to take all of these talks into account, and a few themes have been highlighted on fairness, making sure that everybody's voices are heard, ethics, using technology responsibly, access, making sure that everyone has access and that they can share their data, and that the knowledge that is created can be used, and that AI is changing. We can see that AI can be used automatically, with the SciSpace. They produce the systematic reviews for you, the qualitative component of systematic reviews, but there's very limited human judgment at the center of that. It's a lot of code that is in the background that as a human you don't have access to. And so I feel very scared about using AIs without human intervention as well, because you're not sure if the data is being represented fairly, if they've included the African voice, if certain perspectives are missing, like for instance, the LGBTQI or the minorities, like the Aboriginal people are being excluded. And we need to know how to use AI to build inclusion and to prevent inequality. So I want to thank all of our presenters for their insights and their experiences and presenting their challenges. And we want to build a research culture that values fairness, inclusion, and ethics. And we want to thank everybody, which we'll thank at the end as well. And we want to say that one of our speakers beautifully put it. He said, evidence is never neutral. We need to include all our evidence is never neutral. That's it. And so I want to open up some questions. I don't know. We want to open up the floor and ask if anybody has some questions. I don't see any hands. So I wanted to ask, let's see, who am I going to get first? Let's see. Let's start with the Zimbabwean one. I wanted to know is Meta AI only in English? So I want to open this question to Dr. Godwin Zangare.
It's just Godwin, not Doctor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So our main study was just focused on simplifying the English text. We didn't try out the translation part or the translation mode because we understand and appreciate that translation is more of a linguistics study, which looks into specifically like diction and etc., like looking fully to a person who's trained in linguistics to understand the whole translation part. As information science graduates, we just decided to focus on just simplification to advance readability, and hence we included it in our recommendations that other researchers can look into how AI can translate health information to advance inclusivity.
So my other question was, how would one navigate the internet coverage, limited internet coverage and load shedding in Zimbabwe, and with regards to this? Because I know sometimes in Zimbabwe, I've heard that they go for 3 or 4 days without electricity and without internet. Would that impact the allied healthcare workers with regards to disseminating this AI tool?
Yes. That would affect it for sure. Sorry for that. Just a moment. I need to mute. Okay. So we do understand. I think that's something that we can actually look into in our future research.
Okay.
Yes, because we didn't look into it quite well. Yeah.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you. Does anybody have a question for Mr. Zangare? If not, I wanted to ask Ms. Tofi, I'm not sure if it's Miss or Mrs., but Faiza, how do you feel with your experience? How can universities better support equitable access to essential databases? Because we know that there are certain, like when I was doing my studies, my systematic reviews, I found that PubMed and a lot of these big databases don't actually index African journals.
Mhm.
And I would physically have to go to AJOL and find African-based studies from Egypt, from Kenya, from Tanzania, or actually find these different journals and go and physically search for my topic. So how do you think we can overcome this challenge that we have with inaccessibility to essential information from these different databases?
Okay, thank you for your question. In my case, all my databases was available through the library, the UWC library portal. I did, however, with my systematic review, the criteria is to look at peer-reviewed journals only. So when I was listening to Dr. Kelly earlier on, I realized that if I include grey literature, that would also open opportunity for more studies to be included. Also looking at, because my broader study is to develop a wellbeing program for HIV learners. So with regards to that, just the initial literature search that I did on the topic of HIV studies, there was very limited research that came up. However, when I looked at articles that were not in accredited journals, well, just peer-reviewed journals, there were more articles that came up. So from that, I mean, with regards up, that could possibly be one way researchers could explore that avenue if they would like to, if there's not enough results, just on the when they access the databases that are available. Also, one has to also, I think, there's a need to collaborate with other universities. I think some universities have access to more journals and databases. So that, I think, would also be a possible opportunity that one can explore.
Thank you so much. I see there's a hand. Thank you so much. I think it's Lauren. Is it Lauren?
Thanks so much. Gerald has a comment or question.
Thank you, Prof, for that comment or remark about the African journals. And I will suggest that really that we as a library and the faculties must work together and to create awareness. Because it's true what you're saying, that I also experienced that a lot of my postgrads that doing research, especially with the scoping and systematic reviews, that the content, some of the content are in African journals, but those journals are not listed in the normal index or these big indexes. So then you as a librarian or the person who assists these researchers, you must then go and highlight that, for example, the African Open Access Journal that you talked about, we have to create awareness. So I think the responsibility now is on us as librarians and to go out and create awareness of this specific area in those type of journals that they are there. But some of the researchers and the postgrads, they are not aware of the resource and where the resource is on the platform. So I think it's awareness. We basically is that we must start to create awareness for these resources because they are not linked on these other platforms or indexes. Only one is there is Subnet, but Subnet don't also not have those, for example, like your Kenya authors or some of the other people. So yeah. So thank you very much for that one, that thing that you noticed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you for your comment. I know Lauren is not here, but I wanted to talk to her about I was glad that she mentioned about articles that were placed in journals that are not accredited, because 4 of my articles were placed in pirated journals, the IJERPH 4. And this was before they became pirated. So I can't use that data. Nobody's citing my work, but it's not to say that it was bad research. It was good research. It's just that, and I followed all the due processes. We did critical reviews. I answered all the questions, and so it's a good thing that we also include predatory journals, so that information like my information can be spread. So instead of having X amount of publications, I now have X minus 4. And the effort that went into that study wasn't needs to be taken into account, especially because I had 800 participants for that study. And now the papers that I've published have all been rubbished. So I wanted to just also mention that with Lauren. So I'm not done yet. I still have questions. My last set of questions are going to, so we spoke to Zimbabwe, we spoke to Andrew, and then Lauren. We can't speak to Lauren. Lauren's not here. So I think that from my side, I'm done. Thank you so much. I'm not sure, Lauren, is there any, not Lauren, Leanne, is there anything
Leanne,
from your
yes.
side?
I don't see anything in the chat. So I don't know if anybody else has got any questions for any of the speakers or comments. But yeah, thank you so much, Prof. Kimmy, for your your wrapping up of the proceedings and the questions that you posed to the various speakers. I'm just going to now hand over to Gerald Louw, who's going to, if there are no other comments or questions, he's going to just do the closing remarks for us. And obviously, just a note to everyone that the webinar has been recorded. I'll stop the recording when we leave the Zoom call, and so that recording will be shared, and also the presentations of the various speakers. So I'm going to now hand over to Gerald Louw. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. I just want to say thank you to each and everyone, all the speakers, all the people who present. Thank you very much. It was very insightful. Prof, thank you very much for coming in, stepping in the last minute and help us. And thanks for that you handled the discussion section so well and point out the important points. And really, I learned a lot from each speaker that really presented today. I learned a lot from each one of you. People, colleagues. So, but thank you very much, Dr. Skelly. In your absence, thank you very much for be willing to come and share with us your experience and expertise. But Faiza, thank you very much for you that come up and open up. You know what? Through your work and through your experience, you could have even put a notice on the library website to tell the students or the researchers, please take note that all the databases are not equally accessible, and you cannot download everything that you want from all the databases. Thank you very much for Faiza. That was very, very helpful, not even for us, but to help building our resources and to make our resources available. Thank you for the person of Zimbabwe, Godwin. It was very interesting. I learned that you see the scales. Now it's all other ways of searching. But colleagues, thank you very much for your contribution that you did for us. and stay well and stay good. And hope the next one will go much better. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerald. And thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Fahima for doing the wrap up for us. And just a note to let everybody know, as a committee, the Evidence Synthesis Committee will be hosting a similar type of webinars and colloquiums in future. So please just look out for that when they're advertised. And yes, and we hope to have a lot more people attending future events. Thank you to everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
We will stay in touch with the presenters. Thank you very much. I have the email addresses.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, bye. Bye.